not fall off on these things. Like the chair was falling to the ground. If I have to shut that. You think I want to give more explanation, but I want to.
Yesterday we began. Oh, not ready yet. I'm putting everyone on mute just so that the background noise doesn't disturb others, because when you got more than one person talking, it seems that it messes up the the voices that are going through. I know that it makes you think twice to ask a question if you have to sit there, unmute yourself, and then you're like, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? It's a lot easier to just blurt something out. So I apologize about that. I don't have a good solution, but please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate. If the audio is not coming out clearly and you can't hear me well, because we seem to have problems with that sometimes, so also please don't hesitate to let me know, and I'll try a different solution. Maybe something will work. We are in the middle of Magid, and I had to give a page number, like I said in the past, because every Haggadah has a different page. But we just started the meat and potatoes. By that I mean the main part of Magid is not the story of the 5 rabbis that had a Seder together. It's not the Manishtana. It's actually going through the story of what took place in Mitzrayim, how we became slaves and how we got freed from servitude. That is the main point of the Seder. And in fact, the Rambam says, like we started to talk about yesterday, that Doresh Me'arami Oved Avi, you start to talk about these psukim that we talked about yesterday, why we chose these particular verses, until you finish the entire section that you have to go through, and you go section by section, piece by piece, or in some cases word by word, and using that as a springboard, using that to explain the entire details of what happened, how we became slaves, and how we became freed. So yesterday we spoke about the first part, which is that we ended up in Egypt, and that while there we developed into a nation while still maintaining our identity as Jews. So now we're up to the next part. And the entire pasuk reads like this: Vayareo sanu amitzrim, and the Mitzrim were evil to us. Vayanunu, and they oppressed us. Vayitnu aleinu avodah kasha, and they put upon us, they gave us hard work to do. So the Haggadah explains, what does this mean? Vayareo sanu amitzrim. Now these words, Vayareo sanu amitzrim, could be understood in a few different ways. The simplest way to understand it seems, is that the Mitzrim, they weren't just bad to us, but they added evil upon evil. So they increased their evil doing, and that's what it means. That in other words, it's an unusual word, vayareu. So the explanation is that not only were they evil, but they added evil upon evil. Others, though, give another explanation, which is that they made us appear bad. In other words, vayareu means, the word ra means evil, and what it means is that they made us into evil. Even though we weren't inherently evil, but they presented us as if we were evil. A lot of parallels are drawn between the story of the bondage in Egypt and the Holocaust. And one of the things that, as I recall, it's been a few years since I was at Yad Vashem. I was only at the new Yad Vashem once, but one of the main points that they make in the beginning is that if you want to take a nation that's living there amongst you, they're human beings, and you want to convince your entire country that it's a good idea to take these people and to kill them, then you need to explain why, the same way that one has no pity and they see a cockroach and they kill the cockroach, so too these Jews that live amongst us, they're no better than cockroaches, and therefore we don't have to feel bad if we kill them. We're going to make a mass genocide. We want you to participate, and don't give us a hard time. Don't feel bad about what we're doing, because in fact we're just getting rid of cockroaches. So the first step that they needed to do was this major propaganda to show that we are cockroaches. And therefore in Yad Vashem, they have all these pictures of like political cartoons and illustrations, Jews with the really long noses and charge lending money with interest and always being money hungry and the like. And slowly but surely they were able to, I don't know how slow he was, but they were able to convince the German population overall that it would be a mitzvah to, if you could use such a word, to get rid of the Jews, and there's nothing to feel guilty about. So then when they were ready to exterminate them, it wasn't a big deal. There was no protest, because after all, this is the Jews they were talking about. So here you have this Jewish nation that's sitting there, they're living in Egypt. And as far as everyone knows, they haven't hurt a fly. Nice, upstanding citizens. The police are never called very much to their blocks. They don't have domestic abuse going on. They don't have, maybe Purim, their parties are a little bit too lively, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, they're disturbing their neighbors. But they're getting along. They're getting along with everyone. They're not in the prisons. They're nice people. And of course, who brought them to Egypt? Yosef brought them to Egypt. And it wasn't that long ago. It was over 100 years ago, but relatively, it wasn't that long ago that Yosef actually went and saved the entire population when there was a famine. And not only did he save them in the famine, because of the fact that he knew how to store up the food during the 7 years of plenty, not only did he save them, but even more than that, they were the only country that had food. So because of Yosef's interpretation of Paro's dream, the Jews were able to go, not the Jews, sorry, the Egyptians were able to go, they were able to have food, and they were able to sell it to all the other people that came to buy food from them. So this made Egypt into a superpower because of the fact that not only did they have food, but they were the only ones that had food, and they were able to sell it and make money and become a superpower. So to just go and take the Jews and overnight turn them into slaves would be no simple feat. So therefore, the first step of Vayareu means that they had to make us appear to be bad. They had to make us appear to be evil. So what do they do? So as I'll read in a second in the Haggadah, the accusation against us is that we're plotting a rebellion. And even if we're not actually actively plotting a rebellion, but it's in the back of our minds. And if there would be an attack from a different country, we are like a sleeper cell. We're a fifth column that's just waiting to go and join up with another country and kick out the Egyptians and take over the land for ourselves. So therefore, they start spreading these nasty rumors about us, which have no basis in fact, not hard to even find any hint to it whatsoever. But slowly but surely, they start spreading these stories. And then when it comes time to make us into slaves, it's like, yeah, of course we better make them into slaves. If we don't get them first, then they're going to get us. So this is what we have to do. So therefore, the Haggadah tells us that they went and they went and this is what they did. And I haven't had the privilege of being at my father's Seder for about 15 years now, but I imagine he hasn't stopped. When I was growing up, he always quoted a cousin of ours who was a follower of Meir Kahana, and he used to say that Meir Kahana said that this statement over here in the Haggadah, where they accuse us of being planning a rebellion against Paro, is the first recorded anti-Semitic statement in history. So, okay, cute line. So what happened? What did the Mitzrim say? The Mitzrim tried to make us appear as bad. Like it says in the pasuk, Hava nischak malo. Let's outsmart the Jews. Pen yerbe, because maybe they will increase. And then it will be kisekrena milchama, when a war occurs on our borders. V'nosaf gamu also nenu. The Jews will also join up with our enemies, but they'll already be inside the borders. V'nilcham banon, they'll fight with us. And they'll go out of the land. Now, what does that mean? They'll go out of the land. Like, if your whole thing that you're concerned with is that they might escape, so then I've got a good solution for you. Who cares? Just kick them out. Let them go. So that's why Rashi explains that actually what it means is that V'ala min haaretz doesn't mean that the Jews will go out of the land, even though that's the way it sounds, but it means they will kick us out of the land, and we will be forced to leave the land. Now, why is it written funny? Why does it not sound that way? So the answer is because we find this concept that people, when you want to say something bad, you don't want to say it about yourself. Because if you say it about yourself, God forbid, you could be like cursing yourself. So rather to say the curse about someone else. So therefore they said, and the Jews will leave the land, but really what they meant was, and we will be forced to leave the land. Yes, Sima?
Well, couldn't they just kick us out to begin with? I mean,
Right. So that's the point. They didn't want to kick us out. They wanted they wanted to be able to continue living with peace and tranquility, but also to but also to have things going their way.
They wanted us to serve them the way they would have to do less work. It's
Yeah.
for them than kicking us out.
Right. So really they wanted to make us into slaves, but they needed to go and they needed to come up with this whole propaganda, this whole story to make it look as if they need to defend themselves from us. So that's what they're doing over here. Now Rashi has another explanation, and he says that when they say let's deal wisely with him doesn't mean with the singular nation, the nation of the Jews, but rather what it means is let's deal wisely with him. Let's deal wisely with Hashem. And what were they thinking? So what they were thinking was like this: we have to outsmart God, because this Hebrew God, he does have quite a history already of doing. I mean, I don't know. I guess this is assuming that there's some connection between like, for example, the flood and Avraham, that you would assume that everyone understood that the God that Avraham worships is the one that brought the flood upon the earth. So they say that we know that the Jewish God, he has a rule that he punishes midah keneged midah. Now, midah keneged midah literally means a measure for a measure. But what it means is that when Hashem punishes, the punishment fits the crime. But more than that, it's appropriate for the crime. But he punishes in a way that's similar to the crime that was that was done. So let's say, for example, somebody went and they killed through fire. So it's appropriate then that when Hashem punishes them, he will kill them through fire. So therefore, what the people said was like this. They said, if Hashem is going to punish, and he has a rule that he punishes midah keneged midah, that the punishment is going to be similar to the crime. So what can we do to outsmart God to avoid punishment? So they said, I got it. Here's Hashem's weakness. Hashem swore that I'm good, thank you. Hashem swore that I don't think so. I'll take one. Thank you much. Hashem swore that he's never going to go and bring another flood to the world. So if he's not going to bring another flood to the world, so then that's the perfect plan. If we take their babies and we flood them, we drown them in the Nile River. If we drown the babies into the Nile River, so then Hashem will not be able to go and punish us. Because after all, he swore he's not going to bring another flood into the world. We drown their babies. We would need to be drowned ourselves. Hashem won't be able to drown us because he swore not to bring a flood. Says the Talmud that they made a mistake. There are two possible mistakes what they might have made. One mistake is that Hashem swore he's not going to bring a flood over the entire world, but to just flood one country, he would have no problem doing that. Or alternatively, you could say, and this is what happened, that Hashem swore he's not going to bring the water to the people. But what happened? In the end, Hashem brought the people to the water because they walked into the dry land. After the Red Sea split, they walked into the dry land. And then Hashem just went and brought the water crashing down upon them. So he didn't bring a flood, just the people walked onto dry land, and then he brought the water to the people when the water returned to its original place. So therefore they thought like, we're going to outsmart Hashem, but of course that never works out. So this was step one. They accused us of, so based on the two explanations, either vayareo sanu, meaning that they did extra bad to us. So this is that they went and they decided that they're going to start oppressing us. And number two is that if you say that they decided to paint us that we look evil, so that's this made up story that we are planning a rebellion. So what happens next? V'ya'anunu, and they made us suffer. So Kimash Yamar, it says in the pasuk, "Vayasimu alav sarei misim," and they put upon us tax officers, l'ma'an anoso b'sivlasam, to make the Jews suffer in their burden. Vayivan ari miskanas ufar, we were forced to build storehouses, cities of storehouses for Paro, as Pisom v'as Ramses. These two cities, Pisom and Ramses. Now, what was the tax officers that we're talking about? So the simplest explanation is that the tax is actually not a monetary tax, although some say that, it was a monetary tax. They forced us to work, and they also forced us to give money. Others say that no, the tax was actually just the amount of work that we did. They sat there and they calculated how much work we were doing, and they forced us to work a certain amount, and that's the tax that the verse is referring to. Now, who were these tax officers? So simply put, it would be the Egyptians. Some people it would be the Egyptians. But some say that they're Rabinowitz and Eibschitz, and others say that no, they were actually Jews who were forced to be in charge. These are other times referred to in the pasuk as a shoter. The shotrim were these officers that the Egyptians put in place to be on top of other Jews. And this is similar to also an idea that we have in the Holocaust, that they would go and they would take a Jew, I forgot the name of what it's called, but one Jew that would be in charge of the other Jews, and this would hopefully, in the eyes of the Nazis, cause the Jews to hate this guy that was given power, because sometimes he had to do nasty things to them, but he had no choice, otherwise he would be killed. So, for example, it says that that Paro went and he appointed these Jews to be in charge to make sure that the slaves produced a certain amount of bricks every single day. And he said to them, if they don't produce the bricks, then I'm going to whip you, figuring that this would motivate them to whip their fellow Jews. So why should the Egyptians whip the Jews? Let's get strife amongst the Jews themselves. So we'll make it that the Jews are sitting there and the Jews are whipping the Jews, because they know that they have to push them, they have to motivate them through all means in order to get them to build the proper amount of bricks. So therefore they instituted that the Jews should be in charge. Now it actually says that these Jews never went and whipped their fellow Jews, and they said, please work, please. You understand what's at stake. I'm going to be the one that's going to be whipped. But they never actually went and hit them, and they sometimes got beatings, and they got tremendous reward. They became the leaders of the Jewish people because of it. In fact, we mentioned the other night that the majority of the Jews did not survive the experience in Mitzrayim, and in fact, only 1/5 of the Jews that were alive actually were privileged to take part in the Exodus. But the rest of them died during the plague of darkness, and the reason why they did that is because they didn't believe in the fact that Hashem is actually going to go and redeem us. So therefore, Hashem said, "Fine, if you don't believe, so then I'm not going to take you out." So 1/5 were good enough to survive. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu has these two people that were his nemesis already starting from Egypt, and then the entire time in the desert, they're always making trouble for him. And that's usually they're not referred to by name, but Dasan and Aviram. Dasan and Aviram are the two people that Dasan and Aviram were actually fighting, and Dasan raised his hand to hit Aviram, and Moshe said, Russia, well, he didn't say Russia, but Moshe said to the evil one, Lamasaka Ezrecha, why are you planning to hit him? Now, they were actually, one of them was actually witness the day before to the fact that Moshe had killed that Egyptian. So, because the Egyptian was actually beating up, I believe it was Dasan. The Egyptian was beating up Dasan, and Moshe Rabbeinu. This is the story very quickly. Moshe Rabbeinu was living in Paro's palace, and one day he went for a walk to see how his fellow Jews were doing, and he walks out and he sees that there's this Egyptian beating up a Jew, which according to tradition, this is actually Dasan, and Moshe Rabbeinu's heart melts, and he goes and he kills the Egyptian and he buries him in the sand. The next day, Moshe Rabbeinu sees Dasan and Aviram are having a fight, and one of them picks up their hand to hit the other one, and he says, why are you hitting him? So he says, well, what are you going to do to me? You're going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian? And Moshe Rabbeinu is like, oh my gosh, they're not keeping this quiet like they have to. And sure enough, the word got out and Paro tried to kill him. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu had to run away for his life and not remain in Egypt. So Dasan and Aviram, first, they're the cause of Moshe Rabbeinu barely escaping with his life. Then there's a number of other times in the desert where they call into question Moshe's leadership, and they try to make they try to make trouble for him. So if these people are such troublemakers who ultimately take place in Korach's rebellion and they get swallowed into the ground, so why is it that they're from the 1/5 that survived? They should definitely be from the 4/5 that don't make it. So it says that they were actually shotrim. They were actually ones that took a beating for their fellow Jews. And somebody that was willing to take a beating for their fellow Jews, no matter how bad they might have been, but that they definitely deserve to survive and to live because of the fact that they were sitting there taking a beating for their fellow Jews. Now, one last thought about the fact that they made us suffer. So it says that this Pisom and Ramses were actually, it was like quicksand, or it was very swampy. And whatever you tried to build on it, it didn't last. So therefore, no matter how much they tried to do, no matter how much building they built, the buildings didn't actually survive. Which sorry about that. The idea would be that even a slave, if he actually does something useful, will get a certain sense of accomplishment. And if he gets a certain sense of accomplishment, then it'll make him feel good. But they sat there and they had to work hard and build and build and build, and then they would come back the next day and they had to start again from the exact same place that they had been working yesterday. Now, there's the whole question: the pyramids, which are in Egypt, were those pyramids actually built by the Jews, or not? So some people want to say they're built by the Jews. I think that it's not so clear that that's the case. But this medrash would definitely be a problem with that, because of the fact that it says that we didn't build. One could argue over the 116 years of slavery during other periods it was other way, but definitely during some of the time we were building stuff which did not actually make it very long because it didn't have a solid foundation and it would just collapse. Yes, Emma.
If it was swampland, I mean, how deep could the swamp or quicksand, how deep down could it actually be? They're building on it every day.
It doesn't make a difference. Even a swampland, even if you don't have a strong foundation, first thing you need to do when you build a house is have a strong foundation. If you don't have a strong foundation, then everything is just going to collapse.
It's all going to be on top of those collapsed bricks.
No, but it's not solid. You need something solid, otherwise it doesn't work. Now, the other idea is what it says in this next sentence. They put upon us hard work. Like it says, Mitzrayim es b'nei Yisrael befarach. Mitzrayim made us work befarach. Now this word perach or farach has a few possible meanings. So one possible meaning is that similar to what we mentioned before, that it's a hard work, but the word pircha means a question. And what it means is it makes you question your whole existence. So therefore they went and by just making them work and not even seeing anything that came from their work, that's really what would take them and give them a sense of hopelessness. There's a story that they tell. I don't know if it's a true story, if it's just a parable, about some guy that was locked up in a dungeon, and they had him turning something, and it was very, very hard work. And every day he was walking around in a circle, turning like a big pole that went around, and they forced him to walk around and turn this. And in his mind, he had in mind that he was like there was like a mill on the other side, or perhaps creating electricity, or so in his mind he kept on thinking of what gave him the strength to continue is that he was thinking to himself about everything that he's accomplishing, at least through his work. And after being locked up for 10 years, so they let him go, and the one question that he asked was, he said, "Can you please show me what was connected to that pole that I was sitting there and I was turning?" And they laughed at him, and they said, "Connected? Nothing. All you were doing was turning a pole." And he was able to survive all those years that he was locked up, and that was. But the fact that he learned that all that work was for nothing sent him into terrible depression. So that was the Mitzrayim's goal with us. They just wanted to have us not have any will to live, to think that we're going to wake up in the morning, we're going to have to do the exact same thing that we were doing until today, which is totally meaningless, doesn't accomplish anything for us, and keep on going. Other people say that the word perach actually is a contraction for two words, which is perach, a soft mouth. And the idea is that I don't really understand exactly how this works, but the Medrash asks, it says, how do you take citizens that are just nice, normal, law-abiding citizens and make them into slaves? So the Medrash says that what happened was that the Egyptians went and they said, we had this major, major project, and we need all hands on deck. We need every citizen to come just for a day or two, maybe longer, but however long it'll take. And we have this major construction project, and if everybody joins in, then it won't take very long, and therefore we need all citizens to participate. So the Jews said, Okay, and Paro even offered that for every single brick that they made, they were going to get paid in gold. So there were people were sitting there, they were carefully accounting, keeping track of how many bricks we produced. And of course, everybody was motivated to work hard because the harder you work, the more you're going to get paid. And everybody participated. It says that according to tradition, Shevet Levi did not participate, the tribe of Levi. And they said, we're busy studying Torah in the Beis Medrash, and they'll manage without us. Well, the next day, they sent out private messages to all the Egyptians, don't come. And the Jews didn't get the message, and they came and they said, ha, now you're slaves. Now, that doesn't exactly explain it. But then they had them. And they were slaves. And worse than that, they knew on our best day how much we could produce because they had a record of all of it. So they said, okay, every single person, we know exactly how much you could produce. If you're not going to do that much, then you're going to be in trouble, and we're going to whip you. So therefore, perach, a soft mouth, is because they didn't say, come, you're slaves, but rather they brought us in slowly and softly, and that's how we did it. When it comes to the maror, so there's different customs, and I think I mentioned this already a few classes ago. And one of the customs for the maror is romaine lettuce, and actually halachically, it's more sound than using horseradish, even though you would think horseradish is so much better because it's much more bitter. But romaine lettuce is actually preferred. That's, of course, assuming that you get rid of all the bugs on your romaine lettuce. But romaine lettuce is better. And the reason why romaine lettuce is better is because it says it more closely symbolizes what we went through in Egypt. Because romaine lettuce, this is the way it's described at least. Why is romaine lettuce called maror? Why is it called bitter herbs? Because it has a bitter aftertaste. Okay, if you say so. But it says that it starts out sweet. Matok, it's sweet. Vesofro, and its end is mar, is bitter. So therefore, it more closely resembles to that which to what our experience was in Egypt. That it started out as sweet, and then all of a sudden, boom, we became slaves. Hold on, Simma's waving me down again. Yes, Simma.
If they got into the tribe, couldn't they have just escaped and went back out? Like left after Paro said you have to work for me?
Couldn't they have just left Egypt? Apparently not. Apparently the Egyptians didn't let them go.
What, were there like guards at the border?
Yeah. Yep, there were guards at the border. They didn't let them go. They held on to them as slaves. So therefore that's this word perach. Perach is either a soft mouth or with hard work that makes you question your existence. And the other thing that they did to drive the Jews nuts is that it says at least sometimes they gave the men more what you would call male type labor, and they gave the women what you would call the opposite. They gave the men what you would call more female type labor, and I don't know what that means. I don't think it means cooking and cleaning, but something which typically would be more along the lines of what you would expect from the women, and they made the women do all the heavy shopping. And they'd be like, "Would you just let us switch?" And there's no, because they wanted to drive us crazy. I think I mentioned also the word karpas. So the samach at the end is the gematria 60, which if you add a bunch of zeros to it, so that's 600,000, which is the amount of men that were sitting there working as slaves, or the amount of men that left from Mitzrayim at least, that had worked as slaves. And then the first three letters, chaf resh pei, so if you spell it backwards, that spells perach. So therefore, karpas is supposed to be a hint to the samach, to the 600,000 that had to do this avodas perach, this backbreaking labor. Okay, so that is the second pasuk. So, right, if you remember what we were talking about yesterday, for those that were here, I don't know, I can't keep track, especially because there's no names on most people's identities. But what we had was that when the person would go to the Beis HaMikdash, he would bring his bikurim, his first fruits, to the Kohen. So he would recite a few verses, a few psukim from the Torah, which is somewhat of a synopsis of our experience that Hashem took us to Mitzrayim, and then we were in Mitzrayim, we became slaves, and then afterwards Hashem took us out, and then Hashem brought me to the land of Israel, and he gave me these first, and then he gave me land, and I went and I planted the land, and I got these first fruits, and that is what I'm bringing to give to the Kohen as a gift. So So we went through the first pasuk, then we went through the second pasuk that speaks about how they made us look bad and they made us into slaves. And then the third pasuk says, "Vanitzak el Hashem," we screamed out to Hashem, Elokei Avoseinu, the God of our fathers. Vayishma Hashem eskoleinu, Hashem heard our cries, He heard our voice. Vayares anyenu, saw our suffering, v'samaleinu, our hard work, v'ezra chatzeinu, and our pressure. So, what's the drash? What's the explanation on that? Like it says, a pasuk from Shmos, it was in those days, the king of Mitzrayim died. It's interesting. It says a few different places that the king of Mitzrayim died, and each time it's not necessarily that he actually died. In the very beginning of the whole story, in Parsha Shmos, it says, "Vayaka melech chadash asher lo yadas Yosef." A new king got up that didn't know Yosef. So what happened to the old king? So there's two explanations in the Talmud. One explanation is that I think he died. He was a king that made new decrees. When we say new king, it doesn't mean a new king, but it means new decrees. What does it mean that he didn't know Yosef? How do you not know Yosef? So it says that he pretended like he didn't know Yosef. Because if you know Yosef, you have to have some amount of gratitude for everything he did for your country. So you have to pretend like you didn't know Yosef. Okay, that's the first time that the king maybe dies, or according to some explanations, didn't really die. Then you have another pasuk that says it was in those days, and the king of Egypt died. The Bnei Yisrael groaned from the work, and they cried out, and their prayers went up to God from their work. Now, what does it mean that they died? So according to some explanations, Paro died. According to other explanations, no. Actually, Paro was afflicted with tsaras. Tsaras is a hard word to translate. It's some type of skin disease, poorly translated as leprosy. But Paro was stricken with some type of skin disease, and it says that there's a few people that are viewed kimes. They're viewed as if they died, as if they're dead, and one of them is someone that has tsaras. So that's probably because in the times where we actually kept all the rules of someone that would get this tsaras, usually for speaking Lashon Hara, so then they had to be by themselves, they had to be quarantined, but they couldn't even be together with their family. They had to be literally, totally 100% by themselves, and they couldn't interact with anyone. So maybe that's why it says that they're considered to be like they're dead. But anyway, so it says someone that has tsaras is like they're dead. So when it says the Paro died, it doesn't mean that he really died, it just means he has tsaras. Okay, fine. Why are the Jews crying over that? What do they care? So they say that actually the doctors told them that there's a cure. And the cure would be to take a blood bath, literally to bathe in the blood of 150 Jewish babies. So the Jews were sitting there, they're having mazel tov, many babies at a shot, but then the Egyptians would come, they would snatch those babies and they would kill them to fill up a bathtub for Paro. So every single day and every single night, he would have a bath, 150 babies in the morning, 150 babies at night. So that's why the Jews are crying over the death of Paro, because the death is actually tsaras, and this is causing their babies to be killed. There are other explanations also. Other people say that no, it means that Paro died. So if Paro died, why are they crying? So they say that it could be that until now they had a hope. Their hope was that Paro is going to die, and when Paro dies, so then everything is going to get better, and there'll be a new king, and the new king will realize that we're not deserving of this, and everything will change. When Paro died, and a new king came and everything stayed the same, so then the Jews realized, oh my gosh, we're in this for the long haul. And that's when they finally realized that like things are really, really bad and we got to do something about it. And my favorite explanation, which is said by a number of different commentators, including the Shrak Kaddish and others, is that like this. It says that Paro died, the Jews cried out, and Hashem heard their prayers, which makes it sound like until now they weren't crying out, they weren't davening. So why not? You would think that it's the obvious thing to do. Like, that's what you got to do. You're a Jewish person, you got to daven. If you're in a difficult situation, you got to talk to Hashem, and you got to ask Him. So the answer was that the Egyptian, that true prayer has to come from the heart. And sometimes it has to be accompanied by tears. And if you don't have tears, then you can't daven the same way when you're just whispering. There's something about screams. Sometimes in our davenings we say, Shema tza'akasenu, Hashem, please hear our screams. Now, does that have to mean a scream literally? Can it mean that my heart is screaming out, but that my voice is calm? I mean, obviously, I daven a little bit loud, so you know where I fall out on the matter. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that it's loud. But if somebody really, really wants to give a heartfelt prayer, so then it's got to be accompanied by tears. The Egyptians, they didn't want they didn't want to see any crying. They don't want to see any crying. So therefore, they would beat us up if they ever saw us crying, because the tears, tears melt the heart, and it would make them feel guilty. Sometimes you see these situations where you have a parent who's losing control, and the child is sitting there crying, and the parent picks up their hand and says, "Now I'm going to give you something to cry about." The child really wants to cry, but at that point, or sometimes, God forbid, when a child has been abused like that, so the child actually loses the ability to cry, and even when something really warrants tears, they can't get it out anymore because their body has learned what happens when they cry. So perhaps suggest these commentators that that's what happened over here also. The Jews, they had the cries beaten out of them, and they just. That's not accurate. Let me say that better. Even though they wanted to cry, they were never able to cry because the Egyptians didn't want to hear cries. So every time the Jews would cry, the Egyptians were with them. So the Jews stopped crying. So even in the privacy of their own home, let's say, if they wanted to pray, they had to pray quietly, because if they would pray out loud, and that would be okay. But if they would cry, then the Egyptians would come and they would beat them up. So they had to stop crying. All of a sudden, there was a funeral, and Paro died. And everybody had to participate in this funeral to show the final respects to the king. And even the slaves, even the Jews, had to go and participate in the funeral. So the Jews are there, they're at the funeral, and everybody's crying, and they're saying, he was such a great leader, this Pharaoh Ramses, or whatever his name was, and he was so good, and he led the country, and he was smart enough to appoint Joseph the Jew to save our country, to milk whatever you could out of those vermin, and whatever it is, they gave these eulogies, and people were sitting there, and they were crying. And the Jews took advantage of the opportunity, and they were also crying, except they made it seem like they were crying together with everyone else over the death of Paro. But in actuality, that's not what was going on at all. In actuality, they were just crying out to Hashem. But never were they able to get away with that. Only today, at this funeral, when it was perfectly permissible to cry, were they able to go. So they finally were able to give a good, proper prayer with tears, the way that you need. And because they were able to do that, that's why it says, "Vayishma Hashem es kolenu." That's why it says that Hashem heard our prayers, because for the first time we finally went and gave a good, beautiful prayer that came from the heart with tears streaming down our faces. Okay, thank you so much for listening. Last chance for any questions. Have a wonderful night.